Hi, everybody. Robin here at Toadstool Tarot. I hope the weather's better where you are than here in New York. It's very dreary and gray today. Just a second. I always forget to check my system settings and make sure that the volume is okay. I hope it's all right. It's a little low, input volume. Boost it. I don't know if that really makes a difference or not. I watch other channels sometimes and the sound is so low that I struggle to hear it on my laptop. Maybe if I used headphones. So, hello, Red Wing and SCB, first people in chat. I hope others will join us quickly, because I've made some notes and have some things to talk about today. Let's see, where do I begin? Do I wait a little bit? Hello, Costas Privtis. Saskia, sorry. My goodness. I have recommendations to make, and they're not the usual recommendations. They're not like tarot recommendations. Okay, people are trickling in. Kristen Louise, hello. Volume's fine. Thank you, Red Wing. Okay. My recommendations aren't tarot, but they're kind of peripherally tarot related. First of all, I found out about a book that I want to recommend, and I've listed it in the details of the video here, so you can check that out later if you miss it right now. But there is a deck creator and tarot writer named Paul Huson. If you have ever heard of him, I don't know. He's been around for a while. And he's probably, I don't know if he's better known for his writing on tarot or his deck. He created the Dame Fortune's Wheel Tarot. And actually, I used to have that and it didn't work for me and I got rid of it. But I was reminded of it when watching another recommendation recently. If you haven't seen the channel Tea and Tarot, it's Robert Farah, also a former rock musician who lives in Berlin now, and he does an interesting little tarot tube show, usually on Sundays. Anyway, during one of his, he started to mention books on tarot, the best and worst books that he's read. And, oh, hi, Sandra, welcome. So anyway, one of the books that he mentioned sounded like it was just what I'd been looking for, because I've often been interested in the history behind tarot. Where did it come from? Who invented it? How did it come to be what it is? And I haven't been able to find much other than straggling bits here and there. But he recommended this book, and it actually, I guess it's about reading tarot, but it's also very much about the history of tarot. And it's called Mystical Origins of the Tarot by Paul Huson, Huson. Still in print. I bought and downloaded it on my Kindle, so you can get a digital copy. And it goes through some hopefully well-researched bits of historical facts about the origins of tarot, the countries involved, the different kinds of tarot, its invention, and so forth. So anyway, I recommend that book. I'm not all the way through. I had hoped to be through it by the time I did this, but I've gotten through the initial part, and now they're going through the cards one by one, and I'm only up to, I think, the Hierophant or the Lovers. So I haven't gotten beyond that. What's more interesting for me actually is the earlier part that I've already read, and we'll get into that in a minute. The other thing I want to mention to you is, if you don't watch or listen to podcasts, there is a podcast that I quite enjoy. It's called Mayim Bialik's Breakdown. If you've not seen it or heard of it, you may know her from Blossom and the Big Bang Theory. And she's a doctor in neurobiology. I think she has a doctorate in a couple of things. But anyway, she co-hosts this show with her partner, and this season they've been getting into some really great kind of metaphysical stuff. I mean, there's a great episode on there with Deepak Chopra from about a month or so back. And there are two recently, part 1 and part 2. I listed part 2 in the description below, by Thomas Campbell, who I was confusing him with Joseph Campbell. It's not Joseph Campbell. Thomas Campbell is a physicist, and he wrote this book called My Big Toe, which is a funny title. What it stands for is My Big Theory of Everything. Now, I've also posted a link to the video, not only in the description, but on my Facebook page. So if you want, you can find it there. Anyway, I think these are really important interviews with him and topics that he's talking about, sort of the nature of the universe. And he basically, I'm minimizing what he says and paraphrasing horribly, but if you've ever watched The Matrix, his ideas are sort of along that line, that the cosmos, the universe, is all energy and it's all digital information. And basically, the more we develop our intuition, the easier it is to pluck information out of the cosmos, because it's all around us. Everything we see and interact with is energy. In fact, some may say it doesn't even exist in solid manner. I mean, we kind of formulate it that way. I can't explain it very well, but watch these videos and you will be like totally fascinated by this and highly entertained. And there are a lot of commercials to wade through, and it's not absolutely necessary to watch it so much as hear it. Now, I understand that if you have Spotify, I think it is, that you can listen to the podcast without commercials. It may be available elsewhere, but just look for Mayim Bialik's Breakdown. Part 1 had commercials like every 2 or 3 minutes, which drove me mad, constantly pressing the skip button. But the information is what's interesting and entertaining. But this really got me thinking more and more about the tarot recently. And, I have this thing where I'm very much into the major arcana and less so into the full deck with the minor arcana. And I'm kind of feeling, I'll get into it if I don't muddle my explanation here. I'm kind of feeling like, well, I'm sure that I can get everything I need from the major arcana without having to rely on the minor arcana. I think the minor arcana has a lot of extra little stuff, but it's sort of like easy steps in a way. It's like the major arcana has all the information, but you might need to use more of your intuition to pull it out of 22 cards than 78 cards. The 78 cards, you can pull up a card from RWS at a glance and get it. Sometimes if you pull up the major arcana archetype, you really have to kind of like think about it, intuit, and twist it around in your mind a little bit and open your mind to what comes in, and the information will come in. You can take a major arcana card and read it so many different ways, depending on what you're tuned into at the time. And of course, the context of the question that you're asking, and even more so if it's in a spread and interacting with other cards. But I kind of feel like, in a way, you have to do more work, or I should say, the major arcana engages your intuition more so than the minor arcana does. And I like to encourage everybody to engage their intuition. And Thomas Campbell speaks very much about how to increase your intuition. And this involves things like extrasensory perception, remote viewing, past lives. I tell you, this stuff is really fascinating. So watch the interviews with him. And also, you might want to get his book, My Big Toe. There actually is another book by a reverend or somebody, I think, called My Big Toe, but T period, O period, E period. His is just capital TOE, My Big Toe. And it's actually in 3 parts. And I only ordered part 1. I think the Kindle version was like $7.99 or something. So part 1, I don't know why he didn't release it. Maybe it was just too much in one big volume, but he released it in 3 parts. And right now I'm just making my way through part 1. And there is a very lengthy foreword and introduction, which I kind of skimmed past really quickly to get to the meat of the book. I may go back later and read the foreword and the introduction, and but I'm really enjoying it. And you don't even need to read the book. If you may be encouraged to read the book if you listen to the interviews. You may find you're fascinated enough with this guy to find out more about him, and I sure was. But yeah, I this whole thing intrigues me. This idea, we always sort of question, well, how does the tarot work? How is it magic? Is it woo-woo? Is there something else going on there? Is it psychology? Is it Jungian? Is it archetypes? What does it connect with? How do we connect with it? And I don't even know if I want the answers, but I like the questions and I like thinking about it. And for me, I just know that it does work. And it seems like the more open to the woo-woo, or the more intuitive I happen to be, the better it works. And that's like synchronicities and all that stuff seems like it falls in place or falls in line with this idea of there being energy information encoded all around us, and somehow when we can switch our mind to the right place, we can pluck that information out of the cosmos. I mean, that's pretty incredible. And I think it seems to be like a skill you can develop. Now, he also talks about meditation, drugs. He doesn't like the idea of using drugs. Some people can experience it using drugs, but they're not really expanding themselves or learning it. They're kind of using this tool or toy to get there, and it doesn't really teach them anything by doing that. But there's a way to develop it without drugs, through meditation, through creative visualization and processing, using your imagination to conjure up images, pictures, daydreams, all that stuff, all these images that kind of pop into your head. That's all kind of is it right brain, left brain? I can't remember which part of the brain. One part is logic and thinking, and the other part is intuition. So we need to develop more of the part that's like free and open and intuitive. It's like little kids, see things, fairies and ghosts and whatnot that we don't see because they're open to everything. And then as they get older, they get to sort of close those things off and think logically, in terms of paying bills and getting by day to day, and you have to eat and you have to prepare food and so on and so forth. So this whole thing is totally fascinating. It's kind of blowing my mind, and it's like this idea of how do we open and expand ourselves to all the things that we don't know or don't think are out there, and we have to do it through meditating, going within, finding these ways to expand our intuition. There's also this thing that he talks about, and he sells them on a website really cheap, something called binaural beats, where there are sound vibrations at different resonances. So like if you have like 110 hertz and 114 hertz, and you have them in opposite sides of a headphone, your brain somehow entrains the difference between the two, which is 4 hertz, and 4 hertz is somehow particularly useful or helpful in expanding your intuition or being able to do certain things. I don't know. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a physicist. I don't know these things. But please, listen to these podcasts or buy his book, read his book, and you will be utterly entertained and fascinated. And I think you will find that it can be applied to making your tarot reading better. And also your tarot reading can help apply to increasing your intuition and making you grow more as a person. Well, that's kind of long-winded, but that's sort of the thing. Now, I'm going to go back to what my original topic was going to be, is kind of like picking a little bit at the tarot from its history, pulling it apart and kind of reassembling it. Because I'm really on my high horse about trying to get people to appreciate the major arcana. Now, this is what I think, or this is what I picked up through various historical sources, particularly in the Paul Huson book, but also in other sources too. As far as we know, going back in time, cards with pictures on them came from the Far East, the Middle East. They moved across maybe Turkey, the Mamluks, they had cards. A lot of cards were used, particularly in gambling games. Soldiers used them to while away the time between battles. So they were competition, they were gambling games. And what remains of those in contemporary culture are playing cards. So you pull out all the major arcana, what you're left with is the minor arcana. You pull out one of the 4 courts, and what you've got is a deck of playing cards, which are used the world over to play games. Now think about this. This is my idea. Soldiers in war, in battle, on the battlefield, playing cards, playing games, a competition. Just like wars and battles are competition, you're trying to win something. See, this is the aspect of tarot that I don't like, relating the cards to a game or a winning battle strategy. Think about it. The numbers ace through 10 are in increasing order of importance or value. Usually, sometimes it's the ace, but usually the 10 is the more valuable card. The higher the points, the more valuable the cards. And then you've got the courts, which also go from low to high, jack to king, and those increase in value too. When you are scoring your games, they usually have increasing point values, and the more points you have, the more you win when you're playing cards. So I'm thinking about that in terms of battles and property and claiming land or riches when you're fighting wars. You know, it's like you're measuring that out in the simple game of cards. It's like a parallel to wars and battles. You're claiming territory, you're taking over. You there's something I don't quite understand in card playing called trick taking. Like certain combinations of cards make up a trick, and you play the trick and you win the trump or something. I don't quite get it, but it all has to do with scoring by increasing value. And it's kind of like the way the numbers march from ace up to 10, and then you've got marches from jack or knave up to king. They increase in value, and the higher the value, the more rich or rewarding your take. You get more land, you get more points, you get more money if you're gambling. And all of that is all tied up in this competition. See, I also don't care for sports. Sports, I think, is supposed to be about teamwork, but it feels more to me about fights or battles over territory or property. And think of football, you know, they're all like grabbing the football and running down this field towards their side. And you get more points the more you claim, and the more you do, and the more you knock people down and grab their stuff and run with it. I don't like that about sports, but it really is kind of mimicked or mirrored in cards and games. And I'm trying to move us away from that in the tarot, which is why I like to emphasize the major arcana. For me, the major arcana, there's a little less written about it. Originally, it wasn't the same images that we currently have. And it also isn't, I don't know if it's consistent from deck to deck. I think these days it probably is. But early on, they had different cards representing different things. The archetypes were different, and they may have been part of a game or their own game until they were incorporated into a full deck, which was kind of its game. I like to separate them out. I like to think of the minors as a game, a competitive war game, if you will, and the majors as archetypes based on, where's my note? Based on allegory or morality tales. A lot of the original archetypes were based on saints or historical figures, and each one had a story behind them. They were known for a particular folklore or Bible story or whatever. And something was learned, a lesson was learned, a morality tale, if you will. So that's kind of where I feel like the major arcana came from. And that's where its value lies, because each of those morality tales, they all are a piece of human behavior or activity. We act things out, we do things. And it's 22 different actions if you go through the major arcana. So, you know, they call it the fool's journey. Well, you know, the fool may be a baby, open, innocent, learning, moving on up through the 22 cards. And depending on what little white book you read or what tarot book you read, it can get very confusing as to how to interpret the cards. But I have found that over the past few years, the language seems more common or commonly acceptable or easier to communicate across people. So you look at some of these old cards, like the original Little White Book and the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, and some of those key words are really confusing. They don't seem to make sense or match up with the image on the card. And I think that maybe over the decades, possibly, I don't want to say the language has been dumbed down. Let's say it's been clarified. It's been made easier for people to read the cards by visually looking at them and seeing what actions are taking place in the card. What's the character or nature of the character that's doing that action? Are there other characters involved? Does this relate to a story that gives you more information? So I think there's that to look at. But also, I wonder if tarot, as we've built on from mostly the RWS, which kind of modernized tarot, if some of those images, which they're all depicted sort of as like theatrical representations from the Middle Ages or something, if some of them need to be made more contemporary. And now I won't go into the minors. I'm talking about the majors, basically. And even the labeling. And this has me gearing up for the possibility or the idea of maybe myself or maybe one of you out there creating your own new deck by reconfiguring or reconsidering the archetypes of the major arcana. So I just want to check my notes here to see if I covered everything I wanted to up till now and see what the time is. Okay, we're good. Yes, I think I covered everything I wanted to make a note of. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to, for visual aid, I've got the RWS majors here that we're going to look at. And think about this. I'm sorry, I went so far ahead that I wasn't paying enough attention to the chat, and all the comments that came up are sort of relating to stuff we've passed already. So very quickly, a lot of people saying hello. Oh, I missed Nothing So Strange, I think, or did I? Yes, hi. Paul Husson's book is excellent, says Red Wing. Saskia has the book too, and it's excellent. SCB, Lala, I think, is that Lala? Haven't read the book. It sounds really interesting. I find things like that interesting, says Sandra. Fascinating thought. Late, but I'm here. Will, hello, Will. Definitely open to woo-woo. See tarot as a point of contact between me and whatever is there. Exactly. Left brain. Well, we're all made of energy. Okay. Oh, that's weird. AI is listening. I think I got a note on my thing that says, share your referral link, ? I don't know where that came from. But anyway, I don't have it at my fingertips right now, but I did put the links I was talking about in the description. So, the Fool. I'm not even talking necessarily about updating the images, unless the image has a reference to something that's no longer applicable in this day and age. I mean, how often do we see hobos now? No, we see a lot of homeless people. Maybe that's a new update of the Fool. We see children starting out and doing things with their school bags and books and lunch pails and whatnot. We see people hunting and camping and going out into nature. I don't know. Maybe there's some way to update this image from what it is here that would indicate this sort of like opening into the world. Now, the Fool, originally back when it was part of Marseille, was called Lamat, and it was very different. It was sort of like the madman, the crazy character, someone not right in their head. And very few people look at that that way anymore. currently, I think the majority of people see this as being open and innocent, being playful, being intuitive, opening yourself up to new things and new experiences. Possibly a negative side being foolhardy, but or careless or reckless. But the idea here is that you are open to exploring. So maybe the name the Fool needs to be renamed to something else, like explorer or adventurer or what's somebody who begins a quest or an adventure, or begins to there's a word for somebody who's learning. Novice, maybe. Novice might be the word. I don't know. I'm going to play with a bunch of keywords until one feels perfectly right before I create a new deck like this. But I will reconsider this being called the Fool so that it's more in keeping with contemporary thought. Second one's or really the first one, that was 0. The next one is the Magician. Of course, you all know. The Magician, generally speaking, these days is mostly thought of as one who manifests, one who makes things happen. Innovator, perhaps? I don't know if that's exactly right. No, if it's not always inventor, creator. Sometimes it's just it's not so much the initial creation of something as knowing how to use the right tools to be able to create what you want to make it happen. So whatever that word is, you guys are free to pop words into the chat for me if you think you have an accurate word for that. Instead of magician, what is that person? What is the nature of that archetype? In one word, not spelling it out, but one word that communicates. It's very hard to pick one word that communicates so much. And that's the problem, I think, with single word titles on the major arcana, because it's very hard to find that one word that encapsulates all its varied meanings. Can they all be kind of like condensed down into one idea? Next one is the High Priestess, which, the High Priestess, this kind of relates to religion, but it's sort of like alternative religions. Like we don't have high priestesses in organized religion. They're like other religions, tribal religions or whatever. But mostly, I think when people look at this card, they think of intuition and meditation, going within, quieting oneself. So I don't know if you've got a term for that. I might say intuition. I don't know. Maybe my words for the archetypes are more like action words, or a word that describes an activity. So like the magician would be manifest. This one would be intuit. The Fool might be explore, possibly. Next one we have is the Empress. I always look at the Empress in terms of a comforter. And I don't mean like the comforter on your bed, the bedspread, although that is very comforting in the way I visualize the Empress. Now, the Empress is very much like the Queen. She's a ruler, she's in charge. But the way she's depicted on this card is very comforting, and she's often depicted as pregnant or a mother figure, Mother Earth, mother figure, someone who comforts. So, maybe comforter is the word for that archetype. I'm not sure. Possibly. It's like an embrace, a feeling of safety and security. They're all kind of tied up in that. Hello, Elspeth. Now, the next one is the Emperor. Also, again, these images need to change. I mean, we've got people in armor, we've got them in crowns. We don't do that anymore. I mean, even in the UK, we've got a king, but he doesn't go around every day wearing a crown. You know, it's only certain situations of ceremonial attire that he does that. I don't know in other countries how many. I expect it's probably the same. They don't wear this stuff every day. But in the archetype, we get them, you know, in crowns and robes with scepters on thrones and so forth. So the imagery needs to be updated. The Emperor, for me, the key word for me always is stubborn. Now, that's probably not what other people would say about the Emperor, but it's somebody who's so self-assured, so confident in their action that they almost are unbendable in terms of seeing other people's points of view on it. And to me, that is stubborn, set in one's ways, in power, in a position of authority that's perhaps reason beyond reason. You can't reason with somebody like that because they're always right. Maybe Gaia is more modern parlance. Okay, for the Empress. Next one is the Hierophant. This is a tricky card too because, you know, and we just had a Pope who died, and this is very much like the Pope. In fact, in some decks, it is the Pope. I think the Marseille decks, it's the Pope, or was until they changed it. Some decks changed it to Jupiter. But this has to do with organized religion, but that's not the way I look at the card. The way I look at this card is established thought, institution, information, but maybe, let's see, how can we refine information? It's information, it's data, but it's not all data. It's sort of established data, traditional data. When you think about stuff you learn in a library, in a school, in a class, in church, in a community, and you people that work for organizations, it takes a certain amount of organization for an organization to run and operate. And they have rules and bylaws and guidelines. All that stuff for me is tied up in the Hierophant. So I don't know if information is too simplistic a word, but usually when I see the Hierophant in a reading, it kind of tells me, look to a teacher or a mentor, look to a source that has more information or is better read or better informed than you are. So whatever that word is could be better than the Hierophant. The Hierophant was always a weird word anyway, I think. The next one is the Lovers. Now, the Lovers, for me, is not always romantic love. It could be a love of self, love of nature. It could be connecting your higher self to your earthly self. There is a kind of a partnership there. I often think of this as partnership rather than lovers. It could be a romantic thing, but for me, it's kind of a joining together of two things in order to make them better, to make them whole, to reconcile kind of two sides together, which is weird because that's a little bit like the blending in the Temperance card, or the balancing in Justice. But it's a little different because it's like it's on a human scale. You know, it's a reference to human interaction, usually between you. It could be a business person, you and another person, a partner of some kind, somebody that you are blending, mixing with, collaborating with, cooperating with. Next one's the Chariot. The Chariot is a card that is about movement, but it doesn't look like it's moving. It almost looks like a cement chariot where the wheels aren't rolling. The animals leading or guiding or pulling the chariot aren't doing the pulling. They're having a little rest. And there are also two of them, which means that you can go in two directions, and things are not always black and white. So you have areas of gray. It's like sometimes you want to go in a straight line, sometimes left, sometimes right. Sometimes you have to go in a roundabout way to get there. And for me, a lot of that is about, it's about movement, but for me, it's more about direction. The Chariot is, you have to know where you want to go before you go in order to get there, or in order to get where you want to go. So, yeah, I'm still looking for words, but direction feels a little closer to my sense of that card than Chariot, than movement. Because it's more about the kind of movement in a way, if you know the direction. Strength, the next card, Strength. Strength, you could leave it at strength if you know what you mean by strength. A lot of people these days are talking about the Strength card in terms of inner strength. So a lot of times for me, strength is about perseverance. It's about being able to hang on, hold on to what you need to be able to do what you want to do. Sometimes you get stuck in roadworks. There's a metaphor for life. Next one is the Hermit. The Hermit is, let's see, it's solitude. It's a solitary search. It's interesting because it's very like the High Priestess card in terms of what it's looking for. However, the High Priestess that's a kind of an authority figure. The High Priestess is almost looking for the same things as the Hermit, but there's an ongoing study. It's not just one thing they're looking for, and also they're conveying it to others. High Priestess is in a role or a position like the Hierophant to teach others what they've learned. But what they've learned is something new or something different than they're taught in books, like the Hierophant. And the Hermit is kind of doing that, but they're kind of like a solo, solitary figure doing that. They're finding out what they need to know by going within, but they're not really sharing that with other people. It's for themselves. Next one, Wheel of Fortune. Wheel of Fortune, for me, is the most valueless, meaningless card in the deck, in a way, and yet it's sort of everything and nothing. It's kind of que sera, whatever will be, will be. You spin the wheel and anything could happen. Could be good, it could be bad. Maybe it's just a reminder that there's no stability in our existence. Our existence is filled with change, and it's all a spin of the wheel and where it happens to stop and what it lands on. And the Wheel of Fortune is also kind of misread a lot of times. It's like, oh, luck. Okay, good luck, fortune. Or is it bad luck? You're the fortunate son, Chance chance might be a better term, but chance is still pretty iffy, because question is, do you believe in chance? I mean, if you spin the wheel, there's this notion that, within the energy, there is some kind of plan or multiple plans, multiverses of plans, but they're all kind of dependent on free choice. Like, even if you spin the wheel and it lands on something, you have to decide what you're going to pursue depending on what it landed on. And that's another thing that Thomas, for God's sake, see, that's why I wrote it down, because I'm going to forget these things. Campbell. That's another thing Thomas Campbell spoke of in the interview, this notion about free will, because a lot of people use intuitive tools. I use intuitive tools. I read my cards every day, and I use them as a guidance, like, what shall I do today? And what do the cards have to say? What they indicate what I do. Now, he is an example of a woman who had a pendulum, and she would not make a move or any decision without the pendulum. And everything it told her to do, she did, whether it was right or wrong. But that's totally surrendering yourself over to these energies. The energies are meant to help guide you so you can come to your own decisions. So the energies are more in probabilities, not positivities, not conclusions. They're probabilities, possibilities, and given the information, you make the decision. So when I look at a card, or I look at a spread of cards, I'm thinking about doing something. Is it more probable that this is going to happen or this is going to happen? Well, maybe I would rather have this to pursue, even if it's less likely the result I want. Then I have to think, okay, it's probably not going to turn out the way I wanted, even though that's what I wanted. I can still make that choice. And maybe there's another draw, like, if I make that choice, is there some way to make it work better to my advantage, even though it's the lesser probability? Are you following me? I hope. I hope I'm not being too confusing with you all. Next card is Justice. The Justice card for me is about weighing out fairness or weighing out choices. You've got choices. It's a duality card. There's a scale with two I don't even know what these things are called on the scale. They're weights. But they're balanced, and you're trying to keep things balanced. You don't want life going out of balance. Actually, there's a great old movie, early 80s, a Philip Glass movie. I don't think he directed it, but he did the music for it, called Koyanis Quatsi, which is, I think, translates in some Native American language to life out of balance. And it's a fascinating film of like high-speed clips all through nature and industry in terms of how things go crazy, as we move along. Life out of balance. But I think a lot of times the tarot is a sort of a guide or an influence to kind of help us or remind us to keep things balanced, keep things in balance. Hello, Golden. Welcome. Okay, so next card, maybe that card is balance. That might be a better name for Justice. Balance. Possibly. I need to make a list. I should be writing these down as we talk, but maybe I'll watch this back and do that. The Hanged Man. Now, a lot of people look at this as perspective, new perspective, because you flip it over, you hang upside down, you see things from a different viewpoint. That's good. I often use use it as, I often refer to it as suspense. And I don't mean suspense like in a Hitchcock thriller, but I mean suspend action. Pause, take a pause. If you want to know whether to do something or not, and this card comes up, that tells me, whoa, put on the brakes, stop, count to 10, take a breath, think about it, try to consider other perspectives, consider potential outcomes of your action, then decide what you want to do. But the emphasis is on pause. If anybody watches Juno Birch's drag YouTubes, she is forever using the prompt in her yellow fingernail painted rubber glove, pause, just as a punctuation for everybody to stop and pay special attention. That's what that card does. Tells us to stop and pay attention and think about it before we go further. Death, the death card, again, probably needs updating. Nobody thinks of this as death anymore. They used to, and it's like got a bad reputation. It's a stereotype of dying. But everybody now refers to it as transformation. There's a lot in the news about transformation. We have trans people now. That's a big transformation. But we change things all the time, every day. Every choice we make, we are transformed in some way or are transforming something. And we need to reconsider this, move it away from this sort of one-dimensional viewpoint of death and dying to something else that might be a little more accurate or a little more positive energy. Why does this need to be such a scary card or a difficult card? We should be able, a lot of people don't like change, but we should be able to welcome or accept change so that we know how to deal with it when it happens. Next is Temperance. Again, an outdated, outmoded figure, an angel. We need to update this. Temperance. Temperance, for me, is about blending. No, I don't know if blending is the best word for it, but there's something going on. Sorry, I've got a text coming in. I should have turned off my phone. We're almost done. This idea of mixing things. So you take elements that maybe don't work together, or maybe you need something that works, and it works better if you can blend or combine things. Next is the Devil, and for me, see, when I started to teach myself tarot, and I think a lot of people do this, they find their own keywords that work best for them in readings. And people say there's no wrong way to read tarot. What works for you works for you. So if you find keywords that work, even if they don't work for other people, if they work consistently for you, and when you read with them, things always seem to pan out like synchronously, then you've gotten the right word for you. You're on the same wavelength with whatever this energy is, that it's being able to communicate to you, or you with it, and you're being able to draw things out of everywhere in order to use them. Cocktail maker. Well, if you want to call it cocktail maker, you can. I think barista. There's another word for cocktail maker. There was a whole Tom Cruise movie. It doesn't matter. Anyway, the whole idea about that is, blending things. Now, the Devil for me For me, some people say addiction. For me, the key word is temptation. And, mixologist. Okay. For me, the key word for the devil is temptation. What is tempting you? What is pulling you beyond? You have those old cartoons where you've got an angel sitting on one shoulder and a devil on the other. And it's like, oh, you're being tempted towards good or evil. You're in the middle. You're trying to keep a balance. Maybe you don't want to be a sweet, saccharine, cotton candy head, but you don't want to be evil either. You're trying to find a middle ground that works. And the devil can tempt you into easy outs, easy solutions that aren't always the best for you. So I don't know. For me, that word's temptation. How does one depict temptation? Not sure. Again, a lot of these words, a lot of these are binary things. It's like the devil is temptation between good and evil. The justice is balancing the two things. The temperance is blending two things. We tend to go to extremes, but we need to kind of like come to the center and ground ourselves. Next is Tower. The Tower, for me, I always hated the card. It's always dark and another evil negative card. But I've come around to finding it a different way. Sometimes it's stagnation. It's basically change, like the Death card, but it's more like unexpected change that's more abrupt. So it's kind of like things aren't going the way you expected. Maybe expectations, or it's like unexpectation. It's like things are going to happen, things are going to change, or things aren't happening or changing, and you need to shake things up so that they do change or can change. So there you go. Next one is the Star. I had a great trouble with the Star. For me, the Star is inspirational guidance. Stars are, fascinating. They light up the sky. They're like diamonds, sequins, flashy, little bits of brilliance. Little bits of brilliance, like the sun, but it's not a total illumination. It's like an idea here or there, an inspiration. But also, the way I learned to read this as a guidance card is, if you go back through history, when people traveled the oceans in ships, they looked up to the stars for guidance. The stars were a map they could count on to know how to find their way. That's how I use or read the Star card, as guidance. Now, there's a lot more going on in the imagery here to sort out, but generally speaking, when I get that card, that's what I think of. I think of guidance, and maybe that's a word for me that I can use instead of Star. The moon, often it's dark when the moon is out. You can't see everything. Not everything is revealed. So some things are hidden away. Some things are obscured. We don't have all the information. So it's sort of mystery, but mysterious. Mystery isn't really the right word. It's possibly incomplete information or missing information. More to come. Watch this channel. I don't know. Think about that. Next, we have the Sun card. When the sun is out, we get those healthy rays, but that can also be enough to burn us and cause skin cancer. It's like, got to be careful there. But the sun is illuminating. Usually we feel happier, cheerier when the sun is out. I mean, there's a whole disease or disorder around it for people in Alaska, way up north, where it's dark for months at a time. They get depressed because the sun, they don't have whatever vitamins or whatever that you get from the sun that help keep us sort of mentally and emotionally equalized. So the sun for me is illumination, it's happiness. Then we have judgment. Again, we need to move away from these biblical references of angels, but judgment for me is sort of reflection. It's not really about coming back from the dead, resurrection. For me, it's like you've done things. Now pause to reflect on what you've done, and did you make the right choice? And can you do anything about it? Can you change course? Can you correct course? Or do you have to live with the consequences? And then, of course, you take the next step. What's the next best way to deal with the consequences of the judgment you made? So as opposed to justice, which is kind of like in the here and now or working towards the future, judgment is kind of looking back. It's the way I see it. And the last card is the world. The world for me is, I always look at this as like jumping through hoops to please others. It's very much like the Fool card in a way. It's foolhardy, playful, fun. Who doesn't love to dance, you know? But it's also this notion of stepping out or stepping through, jumping through a window into the future, the next thing. The world, going out into the world. I often look at this card and I think, oh, I've been cooped up in my apartment too long. I need to go spend some time out and about where everybody is and everything's going on. Go out in nature, whatever. Go out in the world. Find what your relationship to the world and the rest is so you can contextualize or configure your relationship to it. So that's the world for me. And that's the world for us today. I went only slightly over an hour. I try to keep it to an hour, and this worked out timing-wise really well. I thought I'd be all done in like 10 minutes, and I might have if I didn't go through card by card like that. But I think that maybe that helped to sort of think about the value of the 22 major arcana cards. How might they be updated to relate better to what we go through here and now in 2025 and on ahead, as opposed to being drawn back visually and concept-wise to the past? Because even early tarot doesn't read the same way as the Rider-Waite-Smith, and the Rider-Waite-Smith's over 110, 115 years old or something already. So, I mean, yeah, we need to be thinking about moving forward. So thank you, everybody, for joining me today. And God knows what I'll be up to next Saturday. But hope something, sometimes these things just fall in place. Maybe my intuition's getting better at picking things out of the cosmos. But see you next time. Thanks. Bye.